Go. Flight controllers, gonna go for landing. Retro, go. Vital, go. Guidance, go. Control, go. Telcom, go. GNC, go. Econ, go. Surgeon, go. Capcom, we're go for landing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Spoon FPV. So on my live stream, where I had this quad for a giveaway, I put the BetaflightF3 in there, and a lot of you wanted to hear about that F3 board and have the review on it. So this is the board right here, the BetaflightF3 board. And before all you F4 guys go out there and change the channel because I'm talking about F3 and you think that it's old hat, Betaflight now I really don't see a reason this instant to go to F4 yet, because the F3 boards can run the full processing speed on Betaflight. You can run AK on D-Shot 600 or 900 or whatever. And if you don't know what I'm talking about the protocols, I'll link in, well, it's going to be up here or here in this corner. I'll link in right there, my D-Shot and protocol video that I went over, so that you can kind of understand what I'm talking about. But it runs full speed on AK, running all the features, even with the accelerometer on. So it's at 40% CPU utilization, and that's fine. And the F4s that I've used have been at like 5, but I'm actually going with this board on all of my quads for the first half of the season until maybe something better comes out. But so let's get into it. All right, so let's get into it. So this is what I'm used to running in my quads. I have a power distribution board, otherwise known as a PDB, where you put the power comes in, and you have a 5-volt regulator and a 12-volt regulator, and you have your output for your camera, and you have the OSD that provides you information on what your current draw is, and it provides you information on your voltage and everything else on screen. So, and then you have your flight controller, and you have these two boards, and now this replaces that. This is the Betaflight F3 board that we're talking about. So from FPVmodel, it's $42. Now this combination before of the flight controller, and I like this one. This is also a flight controller from FPVmodel. It's the X-Racer F303. It's a great flight controller. As far if you just want to standalone and the absolute lightest thing that's going to be high performance, I would highly recommend this one still. This is still a really great flight controller. But this was I ran this combination because it was relatively inexpensive and it was high performance. So this was a $35 PDB, which is not inexpensive, but for all the features that I needed, this was the cheapest set of stuff that I could go with. And this was $35 for this and $30 for that. So we're at $65 for these two units. And this in itself replaces those two components, and it is, I think, $42 or $43, so it's less expensive and it has more features, which we're going to get into in a little bit. But first I want to show you just how clean this builds. I am a stickler for clean builds. I love super clean builds, and the way that the pads are laid out, you run the power, you can't see that side, so you run the power in, the power pad goes here, the ground pad goes here, the ground goes here, and the signal goes here for every single one. They're stacked in the corners, so you get this nice clean build. And the other thing is that reduces your wire length on your entire quad. So the only thing that I'm not showing on this build right now is the camera, but so that is the entire build, and you can see it underneath of it. It's clean. So it lends itself to very, very clean builds, and I love that. So, and the pads are where they laid them out is just so thoughtful. So this is the ground and the voltage. So your voltage comes straight out the back for your battery, and then, like I said, like these are the pads for everything for your different motors, and they go to the right places. I don't know why board guys have not been doing this in the past, just putting the pads. Some boards have been doing this recently, where they're putting, I know the race flight boards put them in the corners, which is really nice, and so people have been migrating to that. The other thing you'll notice when you pick this board up is, or at least I did, is it's heavy. So this is kind of heavier than I was expecting for a board, but so there's something I want to talk about. It's called copper pour. So most boards that you get, like this board, all the boards that you're usually used to have a 1 ounce copper pour, which is the thickness of the copper that they put on top of it. And this is probably a 2 or 3 ounce copper pour so that it can handle the current that's going through it. In fact, I can see how, like when I actually look at it, you might not be able to see that in the light, but when I look at it here, I can see the copper pour and how thick it is. So it is a much thicker copper pour. One of the specs that's not listed on this is, so let's go over some of the features on it. It has, well, the one thing that probably nobody has seen is the SD card. Let me grab an SD card real quick. Pop this guy out. So this is the SD card slot for your black box, and I've logged at it, and I think I've done 4K on this, but I think it'll handle up to 8K logging. So that's it with the SD card slid in there. Now it's not one that you push in and it pops back out, unfortunately. So that's the SD card in there, and like the way they've designed it, it doesn't add anything. You have to have enough board clearance because the SD card is underneath of that, so it's not adding any space to the underneath of it to put the SD card in and out. And the way you get the SD card in and out is I carry a pair of tweezers with me at the field, and you can just pull it out with the tweezers from the side of the quad. So that's how I've put it in and out. I mean, if you had it stacked higher up on your board, but I have mine spaced pretty tightly, so I just put it in the side, and you can still have access to it. It's right underneath the USB port, where, again, more thoughtful board layout, because it's underneath the USB port where you're going to keep open anyhow to plug your USB into. And like I said, there's the pads for in the corners. And then you have everything on here is kind of labeled, and most of these pads no one is going to use. So for them, they have the soft serial laid out and all that stuff labeled nicely on the bottom of here for everybody. But for the most part, the pads that are going to be used are the pads that are used here in my build. So I've used these pads right here, which are, so if I put this the same way, so this is UART1, and this is UART2, or the other way, no, UART3, and this is UART1. And then these pads here are your video in, and then you have power, a 5-volt rail, and a ground rail going through here. So you have video in, video out, and that's what you're going to use for your OSD. So this one's going to come from the camera, this one's going to go to your VTX. And speaking of VTXs, I'll put a link in down below right here of my Unify Pro V2 VTX, where I said that most PDBs and flight controllers can't provide enough voltage or can't provide enough current to power a VTX like that. So because that VTX requires 600 milliamps of power, this 5-volt rail on this puts out 3 amps. So you can power one of those directly, which is a really, really nice feature of this. They've thought of everything, and then it runs the minimum OSD, and we'll get into, and I guess we'll get into that next, and I'll show you some of the on-screen stuff of that. So this is the minimum OSD chip that's on there. If you've ever worked with one, you'll recognize that chip. That's usually separate. And you can, I know a lot of guys are talking about, like, well, you know, I don't want to bring this is one of the, there's so many nice features to this, but this is one of the features that I think really makes it a must-have, besides just the clean build and everything else, is that you can tune your PIDs in the field without a laptop. You can do stick tuning. So let's get into that. So one more thing that I almost forgot before I get into the stick tuning is that I wanted to show, so I said that this was heavy, but I did not weigh it. So we're going to turn my scale on here so you can see it. And the other thing is the current spec for this is not available, but looking at, so this is the RROSD V2, and this handles 150 amps worth of current. I think that FPVmodel is not putting out the current spec on this because they don't want to guarantee it, but you can see that this shunt resistor is actually wider than this shunt resistor, and the copper pour on this is pretty heavy. I would venture to, I don't know the spec, but I would venture to guess that this probably can handle 150 amps of current, which is where you kind of need to be today to be competitive in the market. So it's at least 100 amps. I'll say without a doubt it's going to handle 100 amps, but it probably does 150, if not even 200. But I would say it's probably 150. So so this one has solder on it, and so let's take these two boards and weigh them and see what we get for the combination there. So we are at 11 grams for those two. And then I'll take a new Betaflight F3 board and weigh that, and we're at 8.5 grams. So it is substantially heavier than any one of these single boards, but it is lighter than the combination of the two. And the other thing is, like, you're cutting wire length, so you're not running wire, and you're simplifying things because you're not running wires between the two sets of boards. So it makes a simpler build for somebody too. I'm putting these in all of my quads that I'm racing this season, at least for the first half of the season, until something better comes out, because something better always does come out. All right, so let's get into this. And yes, I fly the FreeSky Horus. I would not recommend it for you, especially since these gimbals are now available for the Taranis for like $20 a piece. I bought it specifically for the gimbals. So let's plug one in and look what we got. And for those of you that were worrying, and if you want a more in-depth review on the FreeSky Horus, I'm more than willing to give it to you. Leave a comment below. So I've been flying it since early September. I got one of the first ones out. So and for those of you that were curious about a little more of my workshop, you can see that. So I'm going to try and overlay this video in a box here, like once we're done here. So okay, so let's get into how we get into the menus here, and let's go through some of what's available. So you yaw left and pitch forward with the stick in the center. So now in the Betaflight menus here, I have to pick this up so I can see. I guess I could put my goggles on, but so we have the different profiles, features. So, and to enter something, you just go into stick to the right, and this is the cool feature. So we can go in our PIDs and change our PIDs up and down. So these are the stock PIDs, and to go back, there you go, or you can. So profile, and then to go back and forth, you can use the yaw stick. That's the back out. So into the PIDs, and it didn't save any of that when I hit the yaw stick. So we'll go into the PID. Oh, it does save it. Yep. Never mind. So it does save. But you can go in here and you can edit all your PIDs without needing to bring a laptop to the field. So that's pretty cool. And that's part of having the Betaflight OSD. So the other is the D-term, the set point for the D-term, for the multi-layer, the 2-degree PID controller that they're doing in the new Betaflight, the angle strength, the horizon strength, for setting your self-leveling stuff. So you can change your PID profile up here. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. If you already have stuff preset in there, your whatever your rate profile is, you can choose if you have stuff preset. So these are the filter terms, and I think I may have posted a video on how to do this. I've gone over how to do this with some of my friends on how to do the filtering, but for the most part, the stock filters are pretty good on a 5-inch quad. So and then these are the gyro filters. So you can go in and pretty much edit everything you want inside of here. So the profiles, the features, you can turn black box on and off, the LED strip, you can edit. So I can go into the black box, enable, and the rate denom is so if I'm running 8K, 4 would be full, I think. No, or I actually don't know the answer to that. So, but that's how much of the PID loop you are collecting. I'll probably put some text in below to correct myself on what the rate denom is when I figure that out. So the screen layout, you can actually edit the OSD on here. So I don't show the RSSI, but I could. The battery I'm showing, the horizon I'm not showing, sidebars no, all this stuff. So you can change. I haven't found a way to change where it is on the screen from this, but pretty much everything that you'd want to change from inside a computer, you can pretty much do here. So this is just the information on what version and everything that you're running. And then miscellaneous is your min throttle, the VBAT scale. So it's pretty inclusive of the features that with this I don't need to bring. I'm still going to bring a laptop to the field because I like to help other people out. But with this, you can show up to the field and not have to worry about forgetting your laptop, because you can change your PID rates and everything else. And the other thing is that, like, changing PID rates like that makes it so much easier to tune, because you don't have to pull up and, like, when I put my battery on, I run a strap all the way around the pack. So when I'm running the strap, like, I can't get to the USB port. So I have to pull the pack out and pull the strap off and plug in the, so it makes it so, like, the tuning process goes so much faster. So that's the features that are available inside the Betaflight OSD that's on the BetaflightF3 flight controller. So, and I guess I should show you how to change some of the stuff inside of Betaflight. So I'll get to that next. So let's connect to the BetaflightF3 flight controller here. So this is why I'm not a big fan of virtual COM port, but this is how I've had it set up. So one of the things you can, even if I take expert mode off, so expert mode allows you a couple extra features, but you can enable or disable expert mode. Whatever. That's a Betaflight thing. But you can see that there's this Osd menu here, which is how we go in and we can change things inside of Betaflight. So you can change it to, the video format is either audio, PAL, NTSC. So the difference between these is, like, this is what North America uses, and then PAL is pretty much what the rest of the world uses. And it's actually a better format because it has more lines that you can see more lines of resolution that come through. But anyway, I still recommend using whatever format that your country uses for, like, all your stuff, because you'll just avoid any headaches. So don't get confused by that. But select for your region. If you're in America, it's NTSC. If you're anywhere else, so again, imperial or metric units. You can set the alarms. But the other thing is so all this stuff that was showing in the video earlier, so you can just drag and drop wherever you want it. And the Betaflight, the logo, you can turn that on and off. You can't adjust where it goes, but the logo only shows up when it first comes on. So the other thing is you can turn on other parts. The on time is actually underneath of this right here. So, but you can turn on the crosshairs in the middle if you like those, and put it wherever you likes. No, you can't move okay, I made a fool out of myself. So the one thing that you can't move is the crosshairs, because it goes in the middles. So, and then you have the horizontal sidebars. I don't think you can move those around either. But pretty much all the text and stuff you can move around, and it's actually pretty simple. So yeah, like the fly mode, stabilize, horizon, whatever mode you're in. So these are the different options available inside of there. This is how I like that. This is not the default. This is how I like to have it set up with the craft name, that my current draw, my voltage, my milliamp hours consumed, and my time. So this is what I'm looking at to figure out, like, how long I've been in the air and if it's appropriate. This is kind of the two things that I look at when I'm flying to see if I'm getting sag on my pack. And this one's kind of for fun for me to know how much current I'm drawing, and sometimes it helps with troubleshooting too, for having the current up there. So this is kind of the setup that I'd recommend, but do it however you like things like GPS, the altitude, you're not going to have any of those because the sensors probably are not installed on there. But if you had them on there, you know, but all of this, the altitude, the GPS, that requires external stuff. So, and for most mini quad guys, you're not running that stuff. So that's it inside of it. And the other thing is, like, while the quad is actually on, like if I had the OSD up and running, I can actually change these around on the fly and look in my goggles and see where they are, and then hit save, and that's the way that I'd recommend you actually doing it when you do it, is just go in and save it. The other thing I've done is I've changed the font to the bold font. I did bold and uploaded it, so that's what I like to run on it. So you just do bold and upload the font, and you can get different font files from the MultiWii threads if you go on there and look. So, you know. All right, so before I start saying any more nice things about this board, there's one thing that really brings it down for me, and these are the pre-release ones, and I've talked to FPVmodel, and I haven't heard back from them yet, but like I talked about the copper pour on these boards and how it's a heavy copper pour. Well, you need to have thermal isolation between your signal ground pads and the ground plane. So the ground plane is this big heavy copper thing, like it's like soldering a giant wire every time you want to solder a signal ground. And you can put thermal isolation to those signal grounds, where it's basically you have the pad and then you have little fingers that come into it to the sides, instead of like the whole pad being connected to the ground plane. You just connect it in small areas, and it doesn't require any change to the design, everything. It still will fit on this. It's just how they define the via that goes through there. So from a board designer, I would have liked to have seen that from them. I've mentioned to them a couple times. I haven't heard back from them. Hopefully and I've had some from the first release batch, the second release batch, and I'm getting some from the fourth batch. So hopefully by then they'll have fixed that. But I know that the latest ones that they've just sent out they haven't fixed that. So we'll see. Maybe you guys out there can talk to them, can send them, say, hey, Spoon says you need thermal reliefs on your signal grounds. I don't know what that means, but you should do it, because he says it, and he says that's the only reason that he wouldn't recommend this board to a noob, because it does make it a challenge to solder. So you'll solder one of these pads here, which is the 5-volt pad or whatever pad, and then you'll solder the one right next to it, one of these little teeny, you probably can't see it, but I'm stretching across the table. So you'll solder one of these little teeny signal pads right here to the side, and these are all ground pads, and you need super high heat to get the solder to flow, because you're heating up the entire ground on the board because of the way that they've connected the pads. So I'll put an image in so that you can see what I'm talking about with thermal reliefs. But that's my that, and the fact that it's not an F4. I would have liked to have seen an F4 from them, but you know, it is what it is. There's really no point in going to F4 yet. But if I'm investing in a board, when F4 is out, I kind of wish it was future proof. But right now, there's no reason to be at F4. So I'm still buying these, and I'm still, because there's no F4 board for me that meets everything that this does. This is amazing. Does clean build, like. All right, and there you have it, folks. So that's the Betaflight F3 board in review, the all-in-one with PDB, OSD, and flight controller. So, you know, hopefully you liked what you saw, and you hit that subscribe button that I'll put right here, and I'll put a couple videos on this side for you to check out. So, and don't forget, you can get your FPV knowledge from a fork, but a spoon is better.